Welcome back to Lokad. Today I'll be joined in studio by Joannes Vermorel, Lokad's founder and CEO. We'll be discussing one of his unique side quests, performing technical audits of startups. Few people actually realize that for about a decade, Joannes has been evaluating software companies, checking everything from code and infrastructure to staff and leadership itself. He and I will discuss some best practices, as well as what he's learned along the way. Now, as always, if you like what you hear and you appreciate what we do, subscribe to the YouTube channel and follow us on LinkedIn. And with that, I give you today's conversation with Joannes Vermorel. Joannes, welcome back. As I mentioned in the introduction, we're here to talk not necessarily about our usual matter, but something that I think is still of significant interest. You do a lot of tech audits, is that correct?
Yes, and it has been the case for over a decade, something like probably almost 14 years or something.
And how exactly did this come about? Because again, anyone who's been watching LokadTV, this is now, I think the 7th or maybe 8th year, maybe Max off camera can confirm that. They're familiar with you talking about supply chain, about all the tech involved in that, but this is probably the first anyone's heard of this, and yet you just said you've been doing it for 10 years. So as far as side quests go, it's been a subtle one. And how exactly did it come about?
In the early years of Lokad, I was pondering the case of taking investments, bringing a venture capitalist. It turned out that I never brought, formal investors in the company. But in the early years of Lokad, I talked to quite a few of them. And after a while, the way it goes is that either you send an email, they send you an email, say, oh, let's grab a cup of coffee or something. And it takes time, meeting with investors to discuss your company and whether they would be interested in investing or whatnot. It takes time. And at some point I was thinking, okay, I'm spending all this time meeting with those potential investors. And that is time that I'm spending not building, not selling. So I thought, what about selling them something? So, just treat those meetings with a venture capitalist as a sales meeting. And so it turned out that I mentioned to those people that if they were interested, so I was not like a super hot lead for them because I was not really desperately looking for cash. So that was like a maybe. But I was telling them that, Lokad might not be your ideal startup because I'm not seeking and desperate for cash. But if you are looking for someone to forge let's say an expert opinion on another investment, I could be your man. And my specialty was not, having a look at another startup and have a judgment on whether they would make money. That's beyond my expertise. This is very, very difficult. But what was well within my expertise was to have an educated opinion about their technological stack. Because it turned out that when you are a venture capitalist and you invest on tech companies, a big portion of the valuation for many of those companies is the technologies that they are developing. Is the technology truly valuable? Is it worth this pre-money valuation that the founders are asking for? And so, lo and behold, I started to do those tech audits, and I've been doing about 1, sometimes 2 per month for, again, I think it has been 12 or 13 years. So it has been quite a while. And so I've done lots of companies, and the format is those audits are very short. They are, by the way, you were asking how do I find the time to do that? Well, I've been always keeping those audits as like lightning tech audits where everything is done in one day.
We'll definitely come back to that because there are implications to the approach. So we'll get into how your approach would differ from what most people will consider the status quo for what essentially amounts to a consultation service. However, just to properly frame this, because you've used the term expert opinion and expertise, to anyone who's not familiar with what qualifies you for this post, feel free to outline your many laurels.
No, I've been passionate about software technologies for a long time. I started programming in primary school, spent most of middle school and high school getting better at programming with more fancy stuff. And I've always been extremely interested in all the things software related. So at the time I started to do those audits, I was not yet 30, but close to. And at the time I already had almost like a decade of professional software experience, with my own software projects, but also other projects that I had done at university and also in other companies, etc.
Now, you also worked in America for a while when you were younger.
Yes,
at Bell, wasn't it?
AT&T Labs.
AT&T
So
Labs, yeah.
it was, again, that was the time that they were really pioneers in machine learning. They started to do machine learning. This is one of those labs that started to do actual modern machine learning back in the 90s. So that was, they were, I would say, onto those, machine learning things way before artificial intelligence become, cool and hype. There were people working on this stuff. But again, that was one part of my interest. More when I audit companies, very frequently, machine learning is just like a tiny portion of the problems. Very frequently, it's not even part of the problem. Those companies can be, of all sorts. There are software companies, but that can be anything. That can be a biotech company that use extensively software. That can be online gambling. That can be a B2B productivity app. That can be embedded software that is going to go into an appliance that will be sitting in a surgical operation room. For hospitals. I mean, again, software comes in like an extremely wide array of situations, and the sort of technologies that goes into those startups vary enormously from one company to another. Even if the core is that it's always, I would say, software is always involved at the core of the startup. That's where I think my expertise really lie.
Well, when you talk about performing tech audits, I think people probably have some concept of what that is, but what exactly goes into that? What areas do you focus on? Are you evaluating just the software? Are you evaluating people? What exactly goes into it?
So the deliverable, because we have to start with what is being delivered. So a venture capitalist is about to invest into a startup. They typically have a letter of intention that is already signed. They are about to put from anywhere from 2 million to 20 million, sometimes more, dollars or euros into a company. And a big part of the valuation is, again, the technologies. They are investing on a team that has supposedly already, developed something. I do not make those audits for like seed stage. I mean, we are talking of like Series A, sometimes Series B. So we are talking of people who have normally at this stage have already developed something. So there is that which justify a higher valuation. Now the question is that, is it worth what those people are asking for? And the worth is not only what they have, but also the sort of technological dynamics within the company, so that they will be able, if they get the money from the investor, to complete the objectives of their roadmap. The people invest not only on what the company is, but most importantly, what the company will become tomorrow. I cannot assess whether their financial projections will be correct. Again, my expertise doesn't lie into the future of, let's say, gambling markets. I don't know. So that's obviously other people who would be assessing that. But what I can do is, if they show me an app for gambling and we have to just check whether it's going to be secure, because if we are talking, let's say, gambling, for example, it has to be extremely secure, then that's the sort of question I can answer. And if it's I would say, an appliance that is going to be used during surgical procedure, then correctness is absolutely vital. I mean, quite literally, you can, if the thing dysfunction, you can potentially kill a patient. So the sort of changes are very different. And so the bottom line is that
Oh, sorry, just to go back, when you gave the example there, I understood the security one, and that aligns obviously with your jacket, but the idea of the example of the surgical piece of equipment, what is your input in terms of evaluating that?
Correctness.
Okay,
Is it going to do reliably what it's supposed to do? It's not like a security problem, because those things are going to be isolated from the network. They are going to be operated in an environment that is already very secured from an IT perspective. No network connection, these sort of things.
Yeah.
But the question is that how do you ensure that you don't suffer glitches, bugs, or anything that could literally compromise the fact that the thing is going to work.
Yeah, many machines actually now are automated.
Yes, and if it operates a pump, pumping some kind of fluid into the patient, how do you make sure that it's not dysfunctioning, that it does exactly what you want this thing to do? So again, the bottom line is that the way I approach the deliverable is forging an opinion, and that will be a memo that I give back to the investor on whether I think that what is my general opinion on the value of this company on its own terms, and that is really the important thing, is that I am trying to forge an opinion on what the company is worth according to what they're trying to achieve. It's if you're developing a video game, the question is that are you developing something that is very addictive, that is very engaging, that is fun, that is etc. Those are your terms of engagement. If you are developing a biotech where you have a new diagnosis technology, which supposedly lets you diagnose, a pathology earlier and faster than an alternative method, does it work? Is it real? Do you have some statistics that are sound? Do you have all the process that seems to indicate that your empirical results are exactly as they should be? That's the sort of questions. Again, if we have a productivity app, the question is, for B2B app, how do you deal with the fact that you have hundreds, potentially thousands of features or micro features? That's the thing with when you're dealing with enterprise apps. Those things can be like a maze of features because you have so many cases to handle. So how does the company manage all this complexity? Are they just drowning under their own complexity, or do they manage it well? Is it like well organized? You see, so depending on what sort of startup I end up auditing, the terms of engagement, what is the value proposition, what is the essence of the value is very different. And so my deliverable is to forge and reflect an opinion that I give back to the investor on what matters the most. What matters the most, and if there is anything that I see during this audit that would compromise this core value from being delivered, I point it out.
Well, again, you said you've been doing it for about 10 or 12 years, assuming 1 to 2 a month. You're talking about at least north of 100.
Yes, that's the ballpark.
So what would be the bulk? Because you outlined, I could be looking at a gambling app, I could be looking at medical equipment. Obviously, these verticals very, very different. So the bulk of your work would have been in, or what's the typical vibe when you or products?
It's really software companies. It's people who are developing software.
Okay.
And sometimes there is a bit of a physical element, that can be people who develop software for a piece of equipment.
Yeah.
Sometimes there is more or less, I would say, third-party software to be integrated. Is it an app that lives, standalone, or do you have? Are you integrated into a lot of other things? Plenty of situation. There is, obviously, there is probably, I would say, 2/3 of what I've done is probably B2B or B2B or professional equipment. 1/3 would be B2C, but that's as far classification can go. Otherwise, it's extremely diverse.
Well, you've given us an effective sort of top-level view of the deliverables and your background. But in terms of the major steps, so in terms of forging an opinion and reflecting on, What are the steps involved in actually arriving at that memo and that opinion?
That's where my approach extensively diverge from what would people
Well, I'm
usually
shocked.
considered as an auditing process. So just for the audience to recap, an auditor, I would say 99% of the people who do audits of any kind, they have checklists. They have checklists. So they have their long checklist with several hundreds of questions, and they would go on the company and, do you do this or that? Yes, no.
Do you
this
have
or
fax
that?
machines?
Yes, no, etc. And the auditor just go through the list, like a drone. And my take is that this process is complete nonsense for technological audits, and especially for startups. The problem is that this list, whatever it is never going to, it's going to break the one thing that you want to do, which is to challenge the startup on its own terms. It's completely irrelevant to challenge, let's say, a company doing gaming on whether they are like super secure. If you do a video game, security is a secondary concern. I know it's people might be surprised, but again, in a startup, your resources are scarce. Does it make sense for most video games, to invest in having like a security officer and invest heavily in having all sort of security features that complicate the life of the users and whatnot? I mean, if you're doing casual video games, for example, it doesn't make any sense. Nobody care about the fact that you're playing Farmville. So the bottom line is that having checklist is a recipe to be a massive waste of time for the funders, and also it's a massive distraction for the investors themselves, because there is like, oh yes, the startup is like compliant with hundreds of stuff that is like irrelevant. And then you would say, oh, but they're not compliant on these 100 items, and which are also completely irrelevant to the success of the company. So again, my take is that they have a business case. They say, we want to go this direction. Business-wise, I let other people assess that it's something where there is money to be made. I don't assess that. I mean, yes, I have my own opinion on whether it seems, plausible at least, but I don't challenge, the size of the market and whatnot. My take is that, okay, let's assume that there is a market, and that if you execute this thing excellently, then there will be, people to be served, and those people will be willing to pay you somehow. Now the question is really, will you deliver on your promise? That's at the core. You are developing a technology that is supposed to do something. Will you deliver on what you're actually promising?
Are you in a position to provide that level of insight? I mean, you can speculate on the technology and whether that'll be relevant.
And you see, so compared to an auditor, again, if I go back to the checklist, my take is that when I start the day, during the first 20 minutes, I will be interviewing, let's say, the CTO typically. And the idea is that within 20 minutes, I need to mentally architect a series of questions to guide the discussion toward the things that are of most interest. And by the way, the way I operate is that after, let's say, the 20 minutes of presentation that are typically done by just a casual conversation, I conduct the rest of the day through a series of interviews where there is someone in front of a computer showing me the way through their code base. So the idea is that I am conducting a series of one-to-one interviews where we are both looking at the same screen, and there is an employee of the company who is acting as my guide through their code base. So
You're Virgil.
Yes, so they are driving me through their code base, because I'm not asking for a copy of the code base. First, that could create tons of problems. That would make me liable with intellectual property. I don't want to do that. So the idea is that I want to have a look at their code base, and that's the way I look at the technology is through the code base. But code bases, which is all the source code developed by the company, the code base can be extremely extensive. I mean, if we are talking of a company with, let's say, even a small company with, let's say, 5 software engineers who have been working on for a couple of years, 3-4 years on the case, and that's really small, we are still talking of easily 100,000 lines of code or more. So if I were to just navigate this code base on my own, I would 90% of my time would just be wasted of me figuring my way. So the way I do that is I have an engineer sitting next to me, and I'm just asking question, and then just show me the code. Show me the code, and then I look at how they navigate, and then we review the code together. Obviously, a sample of the code. We cannot review the entire code base.
Given the potential financial stakes here, why wouldn't you just look through this with the CTO?
I mean, first, the CTO is not necessarily knowledgeable about all the parts of the code base. Depends. If it's a team of 5 people, including a CTO, then probably yes, the CTO is competent on the entire code base. If you are talking a company that at a later stage and they have, let's say, 20 engineers, most likely the CTO is not competent on entire segment of the code base. So that's but more generally, it is also for me very interesting to have other people in the company sitting next to me, because then I can see how fluent they are with the code base. Are they lost in their own technology? When I ask a question, a super basic question like how do you access your persistent layer? How do you access the data that you've recorded somehow? If people have no freaking clue about how it's done, it's not good. If I ask them, okay, what is the last thing that you've done? And they say, oh, I have been developing this feature. Okay, show me. And they say, and if people are like lost when trying to just show me what they're supposedly currently working on, it is not good. So you see, the idea is that interviewing the CTO is good, but then I need also to assess whether the team is on par with the CTO. And that can go both ways. I mean, sometimes the CTO is very good, but the rest of the team is not so good. Sometimes it's the opposite. Sometimes the CTO is very weak, but the rest of the team is actually pretty strong. Depends, varies. And that will also be part of the opinions that I give back to the investor as part of this memo for deliveries, is to also have an opinion on whether the contributors that are currently part of the company, are they up to the challenge for the next phase, where if the investment happened. Sometimes when company starts, their budget is extremely limited, and so they go for people who are not like super talented in terms of technology. That is, for example, very frequently happening when the founder is not a tech founder. When the founder is, for example, someone who had insider knowledge, so who knows that there is a specific problem that needs to be addressed, and this person sees a need, sees that there is a willingness to pay. That happens very frequently in B2B markets. But this person himself, I mean, most founders are men. When this person just is not technical, but they don't have data, so they fetch their first software engineer. They might not have such a big budget, so their first hire in this area might be someone whose main advantage is to be very cheap. And again, that's okay. I mean, you're starting with like nothing. You have, let's say, 20,000 euro. You're putting that in the company. For you, that's already quite an investment. Thanks to those 20,000 euro, you manage to have like a 500,000 seed. That's good. You can have your team of, let's say, 2-3 software engineers to develop the product. And then you want to go to the next stage and now have the first round of, let's say, 3 million. Well, at this stage, if we're talking of multi-million investment, that is a stage where now you have the money to have real talent in terms of software engineering. So the question is that, do the players that you currently have are up to the challenge for the next level, the next stage of the company? So that's not the only question, but that's also one of the questions that is being looked at.
So just to be clear, you, as part of the memorandum, the deliverable, you would potentially make recommendations on who should and should not stay?
Yes. Again, it's whatever would help or compromise, the technological value of the company, its technological trajectory. Sometimes it's you have the wrong players. I mean, you had the players that you needed to win like a super local championship, But if you want to play, nationwide or even go for the world championship, then maybe you need different players. Again, the bringing more money change the dynamics. Suddenly, you can potentially afford people that are way more experienced, way more talented. It varies. Sometimes people are very talented, but for some reason, the dynamic in the company is super crap. Sometimes it can be there are like two CTOs for some reason that did happen in some audits. So you have like two technological leads, and those two people are pursuing different roadmaps. And then my message is, pick one. You cannot remain completely schizophrenic. You need to choose. I cannot. That will be a business decision because it's different markets that you're trying to chase. But ultimately, that's the sort of problems where an investor needs to know if there is something wrong with the tech, or if there will be something wrong in the future with the tech. Because sometimes there is no problem yet, but adding money is like adding fuel to the fire. If you have something that is slightly dysfunctional, if you start pouring a couple of millions on top of it, this what was a small problem may just be magnified enormously by the investment itself. So that can be also a problem. So that's, again, that's it. Just like there is no checklist, for me there is no rules. It's whatever I see that makes sense in terms of problems to be fixed, of recommendation for the investor, is part of my scope. The idea is that I just keep that as a one-day mission, because I don't have the time really to do much more, but also because the founders themselves are very busy. And I think also part of the problems with classical audits is that those things are such a waste of time. It takes weeks, it completely paralyzes the company, and there is nothing good that comes out of it.
Well, on that point, actually, so you're saying you don't use a checklist, you aim to be in and out in less than a day, because when you say a day, that's a work day. So you're talking about, instead of a multi-week process, which is multiple weeks of 8-hour days, you're talking about maybe 8 to 10 hours, excluding taxis and flights. Not using a checklist, and then spending maybe 20 minutes with the CTO, and then making very consequential recommendations on what should be done with a company, things that will impact other people. And I have to ask, given all of those constraints, are you just that brilliant, or how exactly do you make those determinations in a single day with no checklist?
Yeah, I mean, first, the code base, if you're slightly used to read a lot of code bases, those things, I mean, there are tons of things that becomes extremely obvious. You within just a few minutes of looking at the code base, you see, is the code like well written? Is it just like crap? You will I usually have an opinion within 5 minutes of browsing that code base. It's if you're really used to read, let's say, many programming languages, you've seen many code bases, those things, you don't need hours to forge yourself an opinion on whether this is like nice, tight engineering, to the point, well organized, makes sense, or is this thing just like pure chaos and it is so inconsistent. For example, if I go through a code base and I see radically different coding styles, I say, oh, okay, so we have different contributors who have no shared agreement whatsoever on how the code should look like. It's really bad. I look at, for example, the history of commits. That tells me a lot of things. For example, if I see that in the history of commits, you have one commit for a feature, and then you have like 24 of commits to fix bugs that were caused by the introduction of this feature. Okay, super bad. That means that whenever people introduce anything, they will then spend a lot of time just fixing the stuff they just broke. So you see, just by having a cursory view at the last maybe 200 commits, you can see if it's
a pattern.
You can see many patterns. Sometimes, for example, you have the history. Does the commit messages, this is the evolution for the audience. Commits are the way you modify the code base. So you make change, and you typically use Git nowadays.
We use that for the website.
And Lokad internally use it like everybody else for own tech stack. Question is that, for example, when you see changes apply to the code base, do the changes make sense? For example, if you have commits where the title of the commit is more stuff, literally say, what is this piece of crap? No, you do not have like some stuff has been changed. No, then, for example, if you have a bug that is being fixed, is there anything that is being done alongside fixing the bug to make sure that the bug isn't reintroduced next time you touch the code base? There's plenty of ways to make sure that the bugs isn't reintroduced. Are you taking care of that? When you look at contributions, commits, do people have code reviews? Do they discuss how things should be engineered? Again, the code base will tell a huge story, both about what the technology is, but also for its history, you can see the trajectory, how it's developed. And then you can then zoom into the core parts. For example, if you're, let's say, an AI or machine learning startup, your core value is supposed to be some smart numerical recipe that do something that is very difficult or whatever. How are you doing it? Is it just a trick, or do you have some deep expertise? How much moat do you have? Do you have a real moat where replicating what you've just done will be difficult, or is it just like an illusionist trick where you're just using some kind of open source library and bam, actually nothing is your production. You've just recycled something that is in the community. Again, that is a very critical question for the investor, because if people say, oh, we have developed a unique machine learning technology, if what you're doing is essentially reusing a piece of open source, anybody can do it. So yes, it's cool. Yes, it works. But should the investor value your company highly just because you have something that works? Well, not really, because if it's open source, it means that pretty much anybody can do it also. So no moat. Again, it really, the things that I'm looking at really, really depends on the specifics of the company.
It occurs to me you can also, even just taking the example and then combining with a bit of an anecdote, if you take the example of looking at the commit log in Git or Bitbucket, we use Bitbucket, you can extrapolate quite a bit. So for example, even for us on the marketing team, whenever we push anything to the website, you insist on a very clean, tidy commit log, so you can see exactly what was happening, who merged it, who approved.
Exactly, and also sometimes just the way people interact with their code base. I'm talking to a person, is this person, I ask a random question, is this person like lightning fast to just bring me to the right place in the code? Like, oh, there is this feature that is kind of interesting. Can you show me the code that is relevant to that? And then the guy say, oh yes, no problem. Bam, direct spot on right into the implementation of that. That's very good. That complete mastery of the code base, of how things are being done. That's very, very good. So sometimes just the sort of ease that people demonstrate in navigating the code base is telling me a lot. Also, for example, when they introduce features, do they have like well-written tickets to justify? Are just people, software engineers, loose and doing stuff with the code, or do they have like something that is well organized where, okay, I want to do that. Here is my ticket that clearly describes why I want to do that, and then I discuss the different ways to take it, etc. So it depends, but that's typically the importance of the tickets would typically be critical for B2B apps, productivity apps, because you have like an endless list of features that are all like super domain specific. And if you're doing like an enterprise app, you really should not be getting lost into your the infinite amount of features that you could add to your app. So that could be very important. For different sort of companies, that would be a completely different process. But what I'm saying is that in terms of how can you forge yourself, if we go back to that, how can I forge myself an opinion in just a few hours, is that if you're just sitting next to someone interacting with the code base, you can see really a lot. I mean, if you're just paying attention to the patterns, to what people are doing. And
it's pattern recognition.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a finite number of things people can be good or bad at, given a certain vocation.
Yes, and also you check the consistency. You know, it's are people even telling the same story in terms of technology? Like I ask, what do you think this component is doing? And if I get several people who give me completely different stories, I say, okay, so clearly within this team, it's not very clear that people really understand what is going on. I don't need the truth to recognize that things are inconsistent. Again, my goal is not to become an expert in what they're doing. My goal is just to assess whether the team is functional, the trajectory in terms of development of the technology is sane. And also, I'm sometimes also it's about checking, for example, that the resources in terms of cloud computing resources are just under control. Sometimes you have companies who are like mismanaging their, the cloud is fantastic, pay as you go. That means that, sky's the limit. You can spin as many. Yes, you can spin tons of virtual machines, tons of storage, tons of everything. And sometimes, some companies go, I would say, a little bit crazy on that, and they end up with, I would say, a trajectory where they are spending way too much cloud computing resources than they should. That again depends on what they're doing. If you have like how much should you be paying for cloud computing resources? Well, it really depends on what you're trying to achieve. So there is no like clear rule. But again, part of the experience is to assess, okay, what is the workload that you're trying to accomplish on the cloud, and does it make sense that you're paying that much? Is it like an achievement? Well done, your software is highly performant, or is it like super bad? And no, you're just like burning money, and it's and probably giving you tons of more money tons of extra money to burn is just not the right move. You should probably be like fixing those problems before being granted a few extra million, because the thing is that if you lacking money, you cannot discipline yourself to not burn money through unwise spendings in computational resources. The chances that you will become wise once you have a lot more money is like super thin.
It occurs to me, and on that note, we do actually have another video on the topic of computational resources, so check the YouTube playlist for that. But on the topic of money, when you talk about finances, I know when we talk about supply chain, you talk about everything is what is the bottom line financial impact of whatever choice it is you're going to make. Do you take the same approach when you're evaluating? Like, do you look at what is the most financially beneficial orchestration of the technological company, or what is just the best tech, regardless of the price?
No. It's really everything. A startup has limited resources, so it's the idea of that's the problem again with checklists. Is that checklists they have like an absolute perspective. Say you need to do this, and this, and me no. My perspective is always completely relative to the maturity of the company.
Terms, yeah.
Yes, exactly, on their own terms, because you don't want, for example, it would be pure insanity for a tiny company to go for an ISO certification. A complete waste of resource, unless it is a hyper-regulated market where you cannot survive unless you have this certification. But again, what I'm looking at is how good are you to make use of your limited resources to get the maximal, bang for buck. I'm just taking as an assumption that your direction is good, that you ultimately, if you succeed, you're going to make money. But still, if I take your I would say business directions for granted, I say, okay, let's admit that if this thing is done, then you will be competitive in this market and there will be money to be made. Okay, I take that. Now every dollar or euro that is being spent on becoming this number one player on this market, is it wisely spent? So absolutely. That can be, do you have the right talent? Sometimes the problem is that they're spending too little. So they have, it does happen that sometimes the company achieve a degree of success and they don't let go people who were originally hired, but just because they were super cheap. That also happened quite frequently with tech startups. And because again, especially when the founder is not like a tech founder, it's like a sales founder, and they have and then you have the CTO who was originally the first software engineer ever hired by the company. But when this happens, frequently it is this person is not at the level. I mean, again, exceptions varies. Your
mileage may vary.
Yes, exactly.
Well, my question there is, have there been situations, sorry, because you said earlier, you don't speculate on what could happen to the company. You simply...
business-wise.
Business-wise, yeah.
They tell me, for example, the market size is this size. Again, if it's ludicrous, I would object. But if you tell me that the market for a software controller for this type of pump pushing fluids into a patient on a surgical operation room worldwide, there is this many tens of thousands of those pumps and those apparatus. I'm not going to change that.
You accept at face value.
Yes, exactly. I mean, that's.
Okay. Well, on that note, have there been situations where you have gone in to evaluate a company? You are there to evaluate all the things you've talked about, the code, the way the team works. Could they conceivably accomplish the goal using the resources that they have? But you've gone in and their ultimate goal was just nonsense. Like for example, it's 2008 and this company is determined to bring back VHS tapes. Like just something utterly insane that you have a strong opinion is a massive waste of money and time and resources.
Oh yes, that happens.
Feel free to but don't give any names.
No. The thing that is software technologies evolves quite
really quickly.
Yes, quite quickly. And for example, during the last 2 years, I've audited quite a few companies who were doing NLPs. So you see, that's companies that were started, let's say, 2018, 2019. And they have, they went into this AI wave. And they developed NLP, natural language processing technologies, but pre-LLM, pre-large language models. So and there was like an enormous literature of NLP models and machine learning. That is also deep learning. It's not LLMs. And LLMs have been like an extinction events for all those NLP technologies. So yes, there was many for those companies, for example. Yes, my conclusion was this company has developed 20 fairly sophisticated NLP models. They are all completely obsolete. LLMs are uniformly outperforming all of that. You can just throw all the entire tech stack and restart from scratch with an LLM front and center. You will be better. So yeah, there is nothing to salvage. So it happens quite frequently.
Really?
That again, when I say quite frequently, it's maybe 1 out of 10, 1 out of 20, where
you walk in and
the technology is just obsolete for some reason. There is and sometimes people haven't seen exactly what is going to be the replacement. But yes, when I see that, okay, this thing is just going to be, you are solving a problem that is already solved. Usually the thing is that it's not nonsense in the sense that those people are idiots. There is a problem to be solved, and they have developed something that is nice, but there is something much better that has already been found
And possibly free.
and possibly free. And this thing is not yet popular.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, it's not like super well known yet. And I think LLM is really the extreme case where
Yeah.
people, I mean, those companies were kind of desperate because they knew that
It was coming.
LLMs were coming and they were an extinction events. But you're the founder of a company, you've already invested, the money that you raised in seed rounds to do that. And now you're faced with the prospect that your technology is kind of worthless. But you kind of try to maybe fetch an investment which would let you redevelop the technology. Difficult. But again, my take is not in this sort of situation. I don't say to the investors, don't invest. My message is the technology stack that they have is just worth nothing. So, I mean, if the people are good, there might still be a case to invest in them, but just at a much lower valuation, because what they have is just this technological asset is just completely out of date. So it's not an asset anymore; it's a liability.
Well, on the other end of that spectrum, have you ever gone into a company and you left thinking, right, I've just met the next Elon Musk, that guy's a genius. They're sitting on a diamond.
I mean,
Elon
Musk scale, no,
Okay.
no, but yes, I did feel sometimes a little bit jealous, compared to my own company.
Yeah.
Mostly when people have there are so many beautiful niches, this problem. I didn't even, you see the case which makes me, I would say, more jealous are a beautiful problem that is super niche. Nobody even knows that this problem exists. It turned out that there is tens of millions, possibly $1 billion at stake. So this is a niche market, and some people just bring a solution for this niche, and it's beautiful. It's very simple. It's very straightforward. It's to the point. And instead of going through, hyper-competitive market, for example, Lokad doing supply chain optimization, I think we have over 1,000 competitors worldwide. It's a very, very crowded market.
Yeah.
We have some competitors that are multi-billion companies. So I would say the competitive landscape is tough, let's say. And here, sometimes I met companies where they have zero competitor. They are the one. Their clients are happy. They have a solution that is really tuned to a niche problem that I have never heard of before. I didn't even know that it was a thing.
Any examples there, or would that be to reveal?
But no, that would be unfortunately to relieve that. I try to, but bottom line is that think of, let's say again, think of anything that is super specialized maintenance of an offshore oil rig. There is tons of stuff that have to be done, and some special operations need software, as a piece of support, and there are companies who do that. Again, think every single things that is very niche will probably need some very dedicated solutions. So you have plenty of situations where just imagine how much technological equipment a surgeon can be using in an operating room. Again, tons of software to do that, tons of equipments. Even if you want to say measurements, for example, in this building we had something I can say, but for example, in this building they had a control to detect whether we had asbestos. So there was a piece of equipment with software to detect whether there was asbestos in this building. There is a company somewhere doing that. So again, that can be very, very specific niches that may look small, but when you look at the whole global market for it, it's not that small. It's those super small niches might be a few $100 million worldwide, and the company has the opportunity to just take 50% market share because literally there is no competitors, and the alternative is people using traditional pen and paper methods and whatnot.
Well, over the course of those 10 years and having seen a wide array of different examples, are there any general, in terms of software startups, any general best practices and I would say worst practices that you've noticed? So things Let's start with the things to avoid, and we'll end on the up note, so the positive. So things to absolutely, anyone listening now, avoid that.
Yeah, I mean, if you do not care about your technology, it's going to blow up in your face. I mean, that's
Possibly literally.
Yeah. So lack of care, I think it is a killer. It is a killer. And so whenever I see companies where people do not care about the technology, usually the technology is complete crap.
So define, sorry, what do you mean by don't care? As in, like, they're not interested in learning about it, or they did at one point and they don't, or disinterest, or the lack of skill? Like, what do you mean by that?
They are, it's the best, maybe one way to describe that is that is a CTO, when the CTO takes a shower, does he think about his technology, or does he thinks about golf? Is it?
That is a surprise. That hits home a little bit, actually. I'm thinking about work when I'm in the shower.
Yeah, and you see, people who genuinely care, they will have a sort of intensity. It doesn't stop at the office hours.
Yeah.
It really goes beyond that, and they are like extremely curious, extremely eager and passionate, and they want to do the right thing truly. And also there is this element of slight insanity, where it's not just doing what is right for the client. It is literally doing what is right for the technology itself. Are you engineering something that is truly beautiful? There was this anecdote, about Steve Jobs, for example. Steve Jobs, he wanted the iPhone to look good even on the inside. When you tear it apart, the components inside the iPhone would be elegant themselves, with the right choice of colors, the right choice of thing, for something that people could not see. You see, this is this degree of, I would say, to a degree, it's insanity, because obviously there is rationally, it doesn't make sense. And yet it reflects that you care really, really deeply, not just for how it looks on the surface and what goes inside. You don't care. No, they also care for even for the technological parts that no customer will ever see.
Inherent beauty.
Yes.
Literally and figuratively.
So that, I would say, you see, that's when you have people who do not care, it is just like really, really bad. And the worst is probably when when tech companies just outsource the development of the technologies to freelance contributors. Doesn't matter how good or bad those freelance contributors might be. The net result is that the technology is usually a complete mess. It's just the stack is a mess.
Well, again, I think most people, possibly everyone, would agree with you that, like, inherent passion and drive to do a thing well is a fantastic quality. That said, if you only have 20 minutes with the CTO, how do you gauge intangibles? That's what I've written down. How do you gauge those intangibles without a checklist?
Does the CTO, I mean, you see, someone who has intensity, they will tell me, we took this technology, why? Because this. This one, why? Because this. They know the why. And the why is not, I needed a web interface. I didn't know any better, so I picked this one. Kind of work. Yes, it works. Yes. Why did you pick this framework? Do you have any opinion on the technological choices? And it turned out that people who have this patience, they have so many opinions. So it's leaking out of them. They say, oh, let's pay attention. We did it here. It's tricky. It's very interesting. We do it because of this, and this, and this, and this. Okay, very interesting. And then they can't help themselves. Every time I touch a part of the technology, say, oh, we do it exactly this way because there is so many reasons. Let me give you the first 10 at some point. Okay,
it's the passion. That's what they're interested in.
Yes, and you can see also the intensity of the thinking. That's literally, it is not a piece of technology where we did it because there was like requirements, and then we did it so that it fulfilled the requirements. That is kind of the opposite. People who do that by produce code by the kilometer, have like a super pedestrian approach where requirements are coming in from the sales team, we just implement and whatnot. That is a recipe to have a technology, a tech stack that is like super crap.
Well, for example, again, just to stitch together two thoughts, if you had in the past audited Steve Jobs and he told you, so you have a 20-minute interview with Steve Jobs and he told you, hey, look at the inside of this phone, I've made it beautiful, your memorandum would say, he's passionate, but that's a crazy thing to spend money on?
No. Again, that would be one question: is that does it feels like they are going for distractions, or do they just do the extra polish? You see, because the thing is that those things may not be very costly. It's just again, that's the intensity. It's you just do a few % more so that you have the thing really, really tight and really, really nice. And I think that's the sort of things that is not insanity. People who are like overdoing that, it happens. It happens in a specific case. It's typically second system effect. It's when you have a team of founders who are, in fact, the company is like their second attempt. And the first time it failed because of the tech was crap and whatnot. And the second attempt, they are like over investing into all sorts of things that they don't need. The most frequent case is when people over invest in scalability that they won't be needing for any time soon. So you'd say, look at our beautiful architecture. It's so distributed. It could deal with 10 million users. Okay, how many users do you have at this
12.
point? Or 200. And say, okay, so obviously like vast disconnect between what is actually needed and the over engineering. That's also a case. Sometimes also the people who are patient about the wrong things. And I say, do you have a patient that is like for a certain elegance and a beauty of technology for itself, or are you going through some kind of dogma? In software industries, you have all sort of dogmas floating around. Or we need to do it like Scrum, or we need to do this domain-driven development, or we need to do this test-driven development, or we need to do microservices, or whatever. There are plenty of I would say, sort of guru-esque take.
The shibboleths of the industry.
In the software industry, and you have people who are like zealots for this. So you see, when I say intensity, I mean people who love what they are crafting, but who are not zealots about a specific ideology. Because zealots, as a rule of thumb, they do things that just complete mismatch even their own practical requirements. They say, but we have to do it that way. And then because it's because it's test-driven design and we have to do it, okay? But the fact that it's test-driven design is not a justification for doing it that way. It's does it really make sense to do it that way with regard to whatever problems you have?
Okay. And in terms of the best practices, and don't just say the opposite of what you just said, like any off the top of your head, things that when you see, when you walk in, it's like, that's a good sign.
Clear writing. So
you said that before.
Clear writing. When you do, every single piece needs to be kind of to the point, sharp, concise. And I mean, all the comments. Do you have like entire pages of comments in the code, but it's just like bureaucratic take, like, we need to comment this is, there is like a template and you have like a page of comment, but nobody is going to read that. Or do you have like super tight comments that are like, very interesting. Just by reading this one comment, it shed light on the entire code file.
Base,
So I say, not code base, but let's say the code file. I say, nice. When I look at the tickets, is like your problem statement written in a way that is, I realize, like, is it like very clear or is it like incomprehensible mess? Do you have like a do you operate with when you have like a technical challenge? Is there somewhere a very articulate discussion of the problem in the sort of possibilities, or do you have like a crappy slide with insane bullet points that say nothing and the opposite? Again, that's, I would say, quality of writing is I think one of the surest, I would say, telltale sign. Another one is, but it's more like an indicator, is that when people use unusual technologies that still happen to be a very good choice. You see, if they use an unusual piece of technology, very frequently it is just out of ignorance. They didn't know there was like a much more mainstream solution that would be much better. But so usually it's a negative. But when it turns out that a piece of, I would say, relatively rare piece of tech. It can be an open source component, but just something that is very, very niche, very rare, but that happened to be surprisingly to the point for what they're doing. That's very, very good. That means that they have explored what the technological landscape, especially the open source technological landscape, had to offer in the first place in a very extensive way. So that's very, very nice. So when you have nowadays, nobody would be surprised if people say, oh, we're using Python, PostgreSQL, Tailwind for CSS, those are components, or React. Those are components like every even halfway incompetent software engineer knows about those components. But if they know something that is like super specific and that really fit their problem, that is also very, very interesting.
Cool. Well, we've been going for about an hour. I'm mindful of time. So to wrap things up, are there any closing thoughts you'd like to share with everybody?
Yes. I think what has surprised me the most in this decade of audits is that how frequently tech companies can literally spend years and sometimes successive rounds, because again, I'm not always part of the first round of investment, successive rounds of investment with nobody having a look at the tech. You would think that Theranos, this big fraud, was an exception. Oh, such a massive investment. And I mean, nobody did any due diligence of the technology. But the funny thing is that it's the norm. And so for me, what is very intriguing is that how rare are those technological audits. And I say audits the way they do, because when I talk with those startup founders, they usually, the first thing is that they tell me is that, oh, we had no idea that you would be asking those sort of questions. They think that I will come with this insane, stupid checklist, where, again, just imagine Theranos, people would have easily fooled the checklist. There was plenty of checklists around, like, are you compliant with this and that and that and that? Yeah, yes. But the core question, which was, okay, your blood analysis technology, is it real? This thing, do you have like genuine contribution to the field? Show me. Nobody asked those questions. They were like super basic.
Well, this comes back to the point you made before again about skin in the game. So if you come back to venture capitalists, if they're going to invest in your company millions and millions and millions, they have skin potentially in the game.
Yes, but the thing that's where I find very surprising is that usually, even if I'm coming and I'm against, again, third round, nobody has had a serious look before at the technological stack. Like, nobody. So it's very strange. Very strange. I mean, you have, like, again, auditors who are just ticking boxes, but in my book, those do not count. They are just they just pretend to do the work. They don't do anything of substance, and it is actually super easy to fool those people, because all that you have to fool this sort of auditor is to lie. Just lie. Just say, do you do that? Yeah, we do it. Yeah. Show us. I show you something that doesn't make any sense. The auditor is not a tech person, so you could show him anything, and he would just say, okay, box ticks, they showed me something. So, and by the way, at the end of those audits, it's very intriguing. You have usually in the classical audits, I don't do that, but the classical audits, the auditor will say, oh, please, this paper that says that you didn't lie to us. And if you lied, we decline all responsibility for everything.
A release.
Again, my take when I approach that is that I'm certainly going to do that. I do not assume that people are telling me the truth. That's why I want to see the code base, because yes, you can fool me and tell me tons of things, but when we look at the code base, forging an entire code base, forging thousands and thousands of commits, forging hundreds of tickets, forging all the supporting documents, that is way more difficult, way more difficult. So my take is that what surprised me is that, again, the cost is 1 day of audits. Yes, disclaimer, I am not exactly cheap, but still it's 1 day. And yes, it's very, for me, it has been kind of puzzling, because Because even after doing those audits for more than a decade, I still notice that when I come, even if we are like two second or third rounds, nobody has really challenged attack. People just assume that, I don't know, it's good, it's work, they will do their roadmap, it's no check whatsoever. So it's, for me, that's the thing that is a little bit baffling.
Well, hopefully something we've discussed today will make a difference, perhaps even inspire a few people to reach out to you. You're also available for bat mitzvahs and birthdays, I believe.
Yes.
Well, Joannes, thank you very much for your time and for answering all of my questions. I don't have any more, but thank you very much. And thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.